So I moved to Puerto Rico and saved over $3 million in the process. Let me explain. My name is Richard, and over the last 4 years, I went from a broke biology student at UCLA to crossing over $16 million in sales from my online consulting business. And the one thing that just didn't sit right in my mind was the fact I was paying so much freaking money in taxes. So I grew up in California, and my first year out of university, I was also working in California. And so that year, I ended up paying 50% on taxes on about $500,000 in net income. So at the end of that year, I moved over to Texas because Texas is pretty much a 0% state tax. Now my net income that year was $3.5 million. And so again, 37% on that was a 7-figure tax bill. And in 2022, my third year in business, I ended up doing over $4 million in net income. But here's one problem. I was actually only in the United States for 3 months that year. I moved to Argentina and lived out there for the rest of the year because I fell in love with a girl who was studying in Argentina. This is a story for another time, but she actually became my wife this year. But at the end of the year, I still paid 37% tax on $4.4 million. The math works out to, again, over $1 million. And that's when I realized that something had to change. Now in this video, what I want to cover is what are the benefits of moving to Puerto Rico, and then cover the real rules and regulations behind how it all works. Secondly, why I personally moved to Puerto Rico. Number 3, after having been in Puerto Rico for now 9 months, how is my overall experience living on this island? And perhaps the most important question, should you move to Puerto Rico or not? Now this is a video that is really only going to be useful for someone who already has substantial income. So if you're just getting started, that's totally fine, but I would honestly recommend you not be thinking about how to save on taxes, but rather focus on how you can earn more income. And I don't have enough time in this video because I'm just talking about Puerto Rico here, but I actually put together my most well-received popular YouTube video that actually breaks down the best business opportunities that you can get started in this year. There's a diagram I created called the Opportunity Codex that I go over, which walks through the pros and cons of the top 5 or 6 different business opportunities that you could easily get started with in as little as the next 30 days. I'll leave that video as the first link in the description. That YouTube video is my gift to you. Go give it a watch once you finish this one. Now there's 2 core benefits to being in Puerto Rico if you are a US citizen. The first one is called the Export Services Act, which essentially means that if you sell a product or service to anyone outside of Puerto Rico, you are going to be able to get a 4% flat tax rate. Now, if you compare that to the standard United States 37% federal tax, you are making a 33% tax savings. That's huge. So for example, if you make $100 in sales, for example, selling a course or an e-commerce product, if you live in the United States, out of that $100 in profit, you have to go ahead and pay the government $37. Now living in Puerto Rico, you are only going to be paying $4 on that. AKA, you're saving 33 cents on every dollar you make. But that's just a small business owner. I have friends that make $10 million or $20 million in a given year. And if you make $10 million in a given year, again, in the United States, you're paying $3.7 million. In Puerto Rico, you're paying $400,000 in taxes. You're saving $3.3 million just because you live in a different part of the world. The second benefit of this tax advantage of living in Puerto Rico is the Individual Investors Act. And this is actually where things get even more exciting because it is 0% tax. Now, export services at the 4% means that you have to pay 4% on income that is actively earned through your business, like selling a product or service. However, if your money is made through capital gains, for example, you buy and sell stocks, you trade stocks, you invest into cryptocurrencies, or even if you sell your business, all of those are considered capital gains, which would actually be a 0% tax. Now, I have many friends that live in Puerto Rico that only make their money through trading stocks or crypto or different kinds of investment portfolios. And because their income is generated through capital gains rather than through export services, they actually literally pay 0 tax, which is better than where the bulk of my money comes from, which is actually from operating a business that sells a consulting product and service. Now, you might be wondering, well, Richard, this sounds too good to be true. What's the catch? For at least 183 days out of the year, aka 6 months, you have to physically be inside Puerto Rico. The second thing is that once you are approved and your business is registered inside of Puerto Rico, you have 2 years and then you have to buy a home in Puerto Rico. That is to also prove, again, that you are a permanent resident of the state. Now, taking that all into consideration, for me personally, why did I make the move to Puerto Rico? Well, I'll tell you, the years that I turned 23 and 24, I ended up making a total of $7.9 million in net income. Now, if we look at it from federal tax in the United States, that's 37%, which is $2.9 million in taxes. That's a lot of tax money. Now, during that time, if I had lived in Puerto Rico at 4% tax, that would be exactly $316,000 in taxes, meaning that I would have literally had a difference of $2.584 million in tax savings just because 6 months out of the year, I lived in a different part, Puerto Rico. Now, here's the craziest thing. In both of those years, 2021 and 2022, I did not spend most of my time in the United States. In 2020, 2021, I actually worked abroad in Canada for most of that year. And then in 2022, I spent most of the year abroad in Argentina spending time with my now wife. And so the craziest part is the United States is the only country where you have global citizen tax, which means it doesn't matter where in the world you're living. If you are an American citizen, you have to pay the US government tax. This personal year, conservatively, I will make $5 million in personal income, which again, 37% state tax on this is $1.85 million in taxes. 4% is 200 grand. We're looking at a $1.65 million tax savings in this year alone, just because 6 months out of the year, I live on a tropical island. At this point, I just want to make it very clear. First and foremost, I have no problem paying tax. The problem that I have is when I look at what the US government is doing with tax money, I truly believe that I could be using tax money much positively further impact society in this world more than how the White House is currently delegating the money. I have given well north of 6 figures into funding international missions, fighting against human trafficking, and very soon enough in Puerto Rico, I plan on giving back to my local community by actually building schools that promote entrepreneurship, my Christian faith, and English. And that's been a dream of mine ever since I was in university. But if it was just money and we made decisions in life only based off of that, man, I'd be one depressed, unhappy guy. And I would not recommend you make decisions purely based off of money. Because for me, I also made the decision to move over to Puerto Rico based off of weather, network, language, as well as relationships, specifically being my wife. So let me break that down. From a weather standpoint, I grew up in sunny Orange County my entire life. I love the beach. I love the sun. And in fact, when I was a kid, because my family didn't have a lot of money, we were never able to go on vacations to tropical places. The first time my parents took me to Hawaii when I was in high school, I absolutely fell in love. In fact, I told my parents that when I graduated from university, I would want to work as a doctor or whatever my full-time 9-to-5 job would be in Hawaii. And so moving to Puerto Rico is a Caribbean island. It's constantly 75 and 90 degrees, and it's just tropical sunshine. The second is the network. Now, I moved specifically into the city of Dorado, and personally, my neighbors are some people that you might recognize, like Jake Paul, Logan Paul. Ricky Martin, one of the most famous singers in Latin America, actually lives 3 houses down from me. And I'm renting my home right now from the owner of Ford Motors of Puerto Rico. It's a pretty strong freaking network. Thirdly is going to be language. This is going to be a little bit more specific to my situation, but I am studying Spanish actively, and I'm considered a C1, which is almost completely fluent for a non-native speaker because of 2 reasons. Number 1, my wife is a fluent Spanish speaker, and I wanted to be able to communicate better with her more effectively in Spanish. And number 2, in the next 3 to 5 years, I plan on expanding my business into the Latin American market, as well as the Mandarin Chinese market, in order to reach about 75-80% of the world's population. A huge dream of mine is to one day be able to fund or build a church that conducts ministry in English, Mandarin Chinese, and Spanish. And the fastest way to learn a language is cultural immersion, aka being in an environment where you are forced to speak Spanish. I can speak Spanish to practically anyone here, and I can have a natural conversation with them. Y por eso, viviendo en Puerto Rico es muy conveniente para practicar mi español. And now on a daily basis, I exclusively speak 100% Spanish with my wife. And now being 9 months in, I want to tell you what I've really liked about being in Puerto Rico and the things that, I don't really like. First and foremost, let's focus on the bads. Now, the first thing is when you move into Puerto Rico, you're going to need a car in order to get around the different parts of the island. They have a massive import tax of 33% the value of your car. And for me, because in Texas, I was driving a Lamborghini Huracan, which is a $300,000 car that I bought in cash when I was 23, that's a huge problem because literally the import tax just to ship the car and enter it to Puerto Rico, I would have to pay 100 grand to ship it over. And so I made the decision to actually sell that car and instead ship over my 2010 Honda Accord. Now, it ended up being a really good decision because the taxes on that, because it's only a $10,000 car, I ended up paying like 3 grand on the import taxes. But in addition to that, it keeps me humble. And right now I'm in a phase of life where the only two cars that I drive are my Honda Accord and a really, really ragtag old golf cart. And not only is it fun, but on top of that, I don't have to stress about expensive bills of fixing cars. I don't have to worry about my safety in terms of attracting the wrong kind of attention. On top of that, I'm just in a season of life right now where I want to focus, and material things like cars just really isn't my focus anymore. The second thing is there's only a few neighborhoods, in my opinion, that are really worth renting in if you want to have a strong neighborhood. Now, this might shock you, but I pay $17,000 a month for my rent to live in a 2,000 square feet, 3-bedroom home. I live in the neighborhood of Dorado, which is the most expensive, exclusive neighborhood of the entire state of Puerto Rico. And the reason why I decided to move here is because I wanted to get surrounded with a really crazy network of high-level entrepreneurs. Now, my net worth is give or take somewhere between $7 to $10 million. I can guarantee that I am the most broke, most young, and inexperienced business owner in my entire neighborhood. But yes, cost of living is going to be way higher, but $17,000 or about 200 grand a year in rent pales nothing in comparison to the millions of dollars in tax savings I'll be having here. On top of that, another thing that's not very good about Puerto Rico is the infrastructure is old. Puerto Rico does have some third world country vibes, and I say that very respectfully, not to be mean. There's just really old roads and really old buildings, and you'll definitely see that if you are from the States. On top of that, things move on what I call idling time, which means people are just slow. If you go into the medical system, typically a doctor's appointment, you might wait 30 minutes in the United States. Here, you might wait an hour, 2 hours. Restaurants sometimes serve you slower food. Things just tend to move slower. And then one more thing that really bugged me is that traveling is a little bit more difficult. Like last week, I did actually go and visit my family in California for the first time in 2 years. And from door to door, me leaving my house to actually getting to my parents' home, it was a 16-hour travel period. There are no direct flights that are cross-country from Puerto Rico directly to Los Angeles. There's always some kind of direct flight that I would have to connect in Houston or connect in Miami, some other major international airport inside the States. So traveling is a little bit longer. Now on to the things I absolutely love. Number one, like I mentioned before, I freaking love the weather of Puerto Rico. It's hot, it's sunny, we get rain, there's a lot of water, there's a lot of sunshine, there's a lot of rainbows. I just really like tropical weather. On top of that, the neighborhood and network is something that absolutely inspires me and pushes me on a daily basis. I have lunch, I have dinner, I literally play golf and work out in gyms where the people standing next to me are doing millions a month, and I feel so humble being in this neighborhood where people are doing way bigger numbers than me. And perhaps the most important thing is the peace and focus I get living on this island. Now, I've never really been a big partier or a big drinker, but the one cool thing about living in the neighborhood that I live in is there's no clubs. There's no single 21-year-old girls walking around in high heels showing their butts, flaunting, because it's all just family people that live here. Even right now, at the age of 24, I can see myself building a massive empire here for the next 3 to 5 years where I really just don't have any distractions. It's peaceful, it's safe, it's quiet, and it's the best possible environment that I've ever experienced in my life for actually scaling my business hard. So the question really becomes, should you move to Puerto Rico? Here's my honest answer. Don't move to Puerto Rico for the financial reasons. Wherever you live, the most important part of making a decision is, money aside, can you see yourself genuinely be happy in the location that you're living in? And if there is an added benefit of there being fewer on taxes, well, even better. But again, if you're not making the income that you want to make, my best honest recommendation for you is not to move to Puerto Rico, but first get to $1 million a year. But before you can get to $1 million a year, you got to get to your first $10,000 a month. So again, if you haven't checked out the video, it's my best YouTube video that walks through how to get to your first $10,000 a month. I'll leave it as the first link in the description. My greatest advice to you is that you stay focused, you build that business, you increase your income, use the income to change the lives of other people and bless those that you love the most. And maybe one day we might bump into each other, say hi, because we're neighbors on the beach. Remember, how you do one thing is how you do absolutely everything. I'll see you in the next video right over there.